You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 43, Creative Writing Career with Justin Sloan. This ought to be good.
If you would like to support this program, or any of Kevin Tomlinson's work, then we invite you to become a reader. Find fiction you will love at kevintomlinson.com/books.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger. Just like every time you tune into this show, it's like it's always me. So how's everybody doing out there? I am actually having a phenomenal week. I've had a couple of big things happen. I did a short story release this week, and it's getting a huge reception. If you're interested in that, you should hop on my mailing list. And I will definitely try to get in touch with you. Actually, did I tune that? I don't think I tuned that. But if you hop on the mailing list, I bet you'll end up seeing that short story. You can also come on over to kevintomlinson.com. If you look at kevintomlinson.com/books, you can scroll down to the short pants section of the books, and that's where I keep all my shorts. Get it? And so you can look at Edge, which is the new book, the new short, and also a little known secret, you can go on Wattpad and look me up, and I posted the entire story for free on Wattpad. So go check me out there. I bet there's a URL I could include in this. I need to look into that. So, and I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And the other big things that are happening, we signed the papers to put our house on the market this week. So I'm really excited about that. Got a lot of big, cool, groovy stuff happening in that area. We're this close. I mean, we keep, it's like moving by inches, but we get there. I spent a lot of time doing some things to the outside of the house this week, and I've still got some things to go. I'm just going to say that the Elmer's professional grade wood filler is a miracle substance. It's found a permanent home in my in the Word Slinger utility belt. So that, and there's another, excuse me for that. There's another product that I think is very cool called Sugru or Shugru. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Sugru, and it is a moldable glue, and it's basically like silly putty, a little bit like silly putty, and you can shape it any way you want. You can use it as an insulator. It's good for up to like 48 volts. So if it's perfect for like, fixing frayed, charging cords for your iPhone or something like that. I've used it for a couple of things now. I bought the black and white pack because those are the two colors I need most. But I'm going to go ahead and buy some of the other colors. I hear it's available in Target. I haven't found it in Target yet. I've been looking around, but just haven't spotted it. But you can definitely get it on Amazon. I don't know why I'm doing such a big plug for it, but I love the stuff. So, when I like something, I plug it. I don't get anything for it. I may put it on my resource page. If you go to kevintomlinson.com/resource, I may start including products I love on that resource page. So you may find it there. And if you do that, then I get some affiliate dollars. So there you go. Help out a Word Slinger. And of course, go check out Edge. You can find it on Wattpad for free. If you read it and you like it, I would appreciate it. It's like $2.99 on Amazon. Go check it out and buy it and review it, because a verified review does me a lot of good. But regardless of whether you buy it or not, even if you read it for free, the payment I would appreciate most is a good review on Amazon. So go give that like 5 stars if you don't mind. You can give it 4 if you feel like it needs a little bit of improvement, but 4 or 5 stars would be perfect. If you're going to rank it less than that, I just ask, please, just don't even rank it. I mean, reviews are great, but if you start getting below 4 stars, you really get dinged on it. But follow your heart. Do what you got to do. You must do as you feel is right, of course. Anyway, now on to more important things, because we've got an interview with somebody. I actually like this guy a lot. he's got the kind of career that I wish I had known was possible when I started out, because he decided somewhere along the way he wanted to write for a living. He wanted to do creative writing for a living. And so he tuned his entire life basically to getting that kind of work. And now he works in the video game industry. And he's actually writing games for Telltale Games. He's writing scripts for like the Game of Thrones games. So if you've played those, and they're incredibly detailed and immersive, and they're very involved, and they have an evolving storyline. I think you dig them. I've only just sort of dipped my toes into that world because I don't get to game as much as I'd like, but they're fantastic. So go check that out. And of course, that the person we're talking to, haven't mentioned him yet, is Justin Sloan. And he's an author and a screenwriter. He's a video game writer. You'll get the full intro in just a second. I won't keep you from it. But we're talking about creative writing, and of course, that's near and dear to my heart. That's the work I do, and it's very likely the work you do if you are an author tuning in. I get a lot of authors tuning into the show, so welcome. If you haven't yet, pick up Justin's book. You can do it even before you listen to the show if you want. It's called Creative Writing Career. You can find it on Amazon. You'll find it in the links in the show notes for this episode, I'm sure. But go check that out, and you can also check out his blog at creativewritingcareer.com. He does interviews with some top professionals. I am now one of them. He interviewed me this week, actually, sort of a tit for tat kind of thing. And it was great doing the interview, so I can't wait to see what he does with it. So, without further ado, and talking about me a whole lot less, let's shift gears and let's go talk to Justin Sloan, author of Creative Writing Career. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm not actually literally sitting with him, we're kind of virtually sitting together. I'm sitting with Justin Sloan, who's an author, screenwriter, and video game writer. And that last one is probably unique to the guests I've had on the show, man. I don't think I've ever had a video game writer on the show before. How are you?
Happy to be the first.
we got to break barriers at some point. He's also the author of Creative Writing Career, becoming a writer of movies, video games, and books, which I recently read. I loved that book, man. I've been passing around to everyone I know, convincing people to read it. So you owe me like a huge royalty at this point.
I do. I'm happy to hear that. And, book 2 is actually coming out pretty soon, and it's co-written with the person who wrote the foreword on that one. Uh-huh. And we have interviews with people like Mark Andrews, from Pixar, and directed a lot of his own movies now, and a lot of other big names in there. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
So is that the creative careers for military writers?
No, that's a different one. So
that's a different one.
Yes, that's creative. That's military veterans in creative careers, and that's got some also awesome interviews. It's it's a bunch of veterans, but it's good for everybody because it's really just advice on, and that's open to writing, acting, directing, producing, also games, and also some other areas. Like we have an artist in there who did some cool cover work for comics, and so it's that one's like broad and it's awesome. And then the target there, of course, the niche is that it's veterans. But I've had lots of people read who aren't veterans who found it just as useful. But no, this one's just totally different. It's just part 2 to Creative Writing Career, and it's the exact same thing. Just writers of comics, books, video games, movies, and it's got some people like the guy who produced all the Batman movies, who also wrote a bunch of Batman comics. He's in there, and we have some awesome people. This woman, her name's Shion Takeuchi. She writes on Gravity Falls right now, and she used to be at Pixar as a story artist. And she's in there, and so it's going to be pretty exciting. It should be in the next couple of months here, so I'll be sure to send you a copy, of course.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, man. And there's something about those kind of books. It's kind of like my show. Like it's like having a mentor in your pocket, basically. So
exactly.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
And I don't know if you saw that we labeled the series Creative Mentor, so that's what we're going for.
I saw that. Yeah, it wasn't like that earlier, right? Because when I bought it, okay, I was just checking myself because I had notes and I did not see the Creative Mentor book 1 when I bought the book. So
that's another thing you'll notice. And for those listeners who want to make fun of me with my military book, the military veterans one, at one point it was called Military Mentor Book 1, and we've changed it to Creative Mentor Book 3 for now until more Military Mentor books come out, and then we might relabel that as Military Mentor Book again. So we'll see.
Okay, because it's kind of on hiatus as you gather more material for that, or
Yeah, well, we figure right now it really falls into the creative mentor books, but if we have like, 2 or 3 writing specific books for creative mentor, and then we have like 2 or 3 specific books that relate to military, like one on creative and one on generic or finance or something, it'd be kind of fun to have those 2 separate series. And it's not like most people really pay attention to what the series name is.
Right.
At least I don't usually. So it's kind of just more a fun way of how it shows up on Amazon.
Right. Yeah. You get more keyword play that way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So do you do a lot of that? Do you do sort of all your own marketing on this stuff?
Yes. Although, so far I've only self-published as far as my novels and nonfiction books, but I publish short stories and poetry through literary magazines and whatnot. But my first published through a small press book is coming out pretty soon, a novel, and so that one, I guess I'll see how that works as far as whether they do any marketing or not. But so far, it's been all me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always curious about that because it's sort of. I'm nervous about that. Like I used when I got into this, I got a publishing contract originally, and figured out pretty quick I was going to start losing money. And
yeah.
So
well, there's some horror stories too out there, and this is why I ended up short. I was originally back in the day. I went to a master's program that's pretty against self-publishing. It seems all the teachers aren't really big fans of it because there's no gateway person blocking the amateurs. But I went to all these conferences and I talked to a lot of my friends who were publishing with small presses, and there were some horror stories out there about they would publish without telling you, so you can't really like promote it when you need to, and they would do things like sometimes editing jobs wouldn't be that great and they'd come out and you'd be embarrassed, or they'd put a cover on there and not even ask you if that cover's good. And some self-published small presses are amazing at this. You just have to do your homework, and I think the one I'm going with has done a great job so far, and I've talked to friends who've gone through them and they've done a great job. So as long as you do your homework, it's fine. But like you said, also the royalty share is quite different on that versus self-publishing. So there's that if you think you can go it yourself, and there's also the freedom. This is why I self-published my children's books or my young preteen books, is because I wanted freedom to play around with them. I wanted to be able to change things if I wanted to play with the price. I wanted to be able, if I ever wanted to change the cover, just to easily to be able to do all that. And if you go through a publishing company, you can't do that, of course.
Right. Yeah. And that kind of scares me a little because I think every author has this fear that he's going to lose control of his work and it's going to be taken away and turned into something that doesn't represent him but still has his name on the cover.
Yeah, and that's why it's okay to maybe do the hybrid route where you do a little bit of both, because then you have your books out there that somebody else has control over. I think you listen to self-publishing podcast and they were talking about that, where their book that they went through Amazon, they have no control over it anymore, and their other ones they're repackaging and branding in different ways, but that one is just they can't touch it.
Right. Yeah.
Which in some ways that kind of sucks.
Yeah, it does. Sure. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens as self-publishing sort of changes that universe, because like you and I, we have a body of work out there that we've self-published, and if a publisher does come along and wants to work with us, we have a lot more negotiating power, he meant to say. So I didn't mean to turn this into a whole self-publishing podcast .20, but no, that's no problem, man. I love talking about this stuff, and I think you and I could probably go on for a really long time. But I wanted to talk specifically about your work, and I'm interested, of course, in the you're in the video game industry, which I think, first of all, I've thought about it before, but I never thought about it as a writing career before. So I'm really interested to hear how you got into that, and what advice you'd have for people that might be interested in it.
Yeah, and so it really depends on what kind of games you want to do, of course. A lot of the game companies that are hiring are social type games, or, just like iPad-only games or whatnot. And that's I think it's probably a different style of writing. A lot of the ones I've talked to, they do more of like, you write in Excel, you write a bunch of jokes, and sometimes you'll still do the full stories, but oftentimes it's quite different. And so for what we do, I work at Telltale Games, where we do episodic games that are very much like watching a movie, but you play them.
Yeah.
And so kind of like, so we do Game of Thrones, we did Walking Dead, we're doing Tales from the Borderlands, we're doing a Minecraft game, we have, and then there's other games that are kind of like that, like Life is Strange has some similarities. There's other games that have had similarities like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, but they're not episodic. But these kind of games that are very movie styles, and like the pace, and what I mean by that is really the characters are what drive it, and the pacing, and then there's this whole other level of the player ownership, and like you the morals are really reflected back at you. Like, what are you going to do in this situation? Not what's your player going to do, what's your character, going to do, right. But what are you as a player? How do your moral lines, where are they? And so that's what makes it really exciting. And as a writer, that's what makes it really exciting too, because I studied screenwriting and fiction novel writing and whatnot. And it didn't really have, I wouldn't say that you have to study something other than that to get into this kind of video game writing, because a lot of after that it's just learning on the job, because the big difference is that player ownership aspect. Right. So you're learning everything that you do in screenwriting, from structure to character to keeping the conflict tense and tension and all that stuff. And what you're adding on top of that is, in every situation you're thinking, okay, you already think about what's the goal, but now you're thinking, okay, how can the player own that moment? How can that decision be owned by the player so you feel like you made the difference? And how can that moral line come up? And that kind of discussions go on in the company. And it's a great learning environment as a writer too, which I feel is definitely burning over into my fiction writing, because now as I'm reading books, I'm thinking about this. As I'm writing books, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, how can I make the reader feel like as if they were the character, the protagonist at that moment, that they owned what just happened, that they changed it, which obviously they can't do unless it's an interactive novel, which of course we could write. Right. Maybe we will someday, but for now, it's really just kind of getting that same feeling across.
Yeah, technology has really changed everything about what a book is.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see an interactive novel where it's like those old choose your own adventure books, but sort of on steroids.
And I've been talking to a guy who does those, and I should pull up his name so I can reference him at some point. But I've been talking to him, and we've been talking about maybe doing one together, because he does a bunch of those right now. And with my Telltale experience, it'd be kind of cool to take that, and because sometimes you'll see these out there, and the choices they make, like choose your own adventure ones, aren't always the moral dilemma choices. They're more like, do you want to go down this path or this path, which could be kind of boring. Mm-hmm. And so if we could take those same, those books and really make them about the character, and it's all about the character, and it's all about your moral choices, I think that'd be an awesome book to read. Yeah,
that'd be cool. I interviewed Michael Laron, who is he writes some books that are like that.
Oh, that's who it is. Yeah, Michael Laron.
Is that it? Michael Laron? Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Very cool.
That's funny.
He was on the show early on when I first started the show. Yeah, I just did a podcast with those guys last night. They do the To Be Read podcast. So
nice.
Yeah.
To Be Read podcast. Yeah, I'll have to get on there too. Yeah, so we're talking about doing that. So keep your eyes open. We'll see if it happens. We have to find a story that we both believe in and love. And
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I like the stuff he's doing. I've read a couple of those books. It brings me back.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you noticed, but one of his books is about a teddy bear who has to go and save his kid, and one of my books is about that. So that's how we connected.
I did notice that when you were describing, because I was in your book, you used that story as a guide, and that's Teddy Bear. What's it called again? I'm sorry.
My first one is called Teddy Bears in Monsterland, and then I have a follow-up called Teddy Bears and the Halloween Ghost.
Okay. So I did notice that, and in fact, I meant to say something to Michael last night on the show about that. I just completely forgot.
Yeah, that'd been funny if we both cross-referenced each other.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah, when I first got into to writing, it was I just wanted to write stories in books, and that's it. The idea of writing for something like a video game was just completely foreign to me. It shouldn't have been. I mean, I played a ton of games growing up, and some of them even had decent storylines, but I think it's kind of interesting that that's the route you went. Was that the goal?
So no, not exactly. I've always been a gamer. When I was 12, me and my buddy, we tried to write a game together, and we did the maps and the storyline and characters, and we started calling companies up and trying to sell it, and we were 12, and they laughed at us. They didn't laugh at us. They were nice, but they didn't take it seriously, of course.
Yeah.
They're like, that's not really how it's done, dude. But so I've always had that going for me, but for a while I kind of got sidetracked in the sense that I thought I had to provide for my family and get a real career, and I was like, that's not a real career. Nobody could, that's for dreamers, which I think is a wrong attitude to have, obviously, because now I've gone that route. So what happened is I went to grad school for international relations and went down this whole other track of going in the government and doing international relations type work. And at some point along the line, I was like, this is cool, but it's like I mentioned on the self-publishing podcast, I was like, this is 8 hours a day where I'm not writing, I'm not being creative, and I need to be creative every hour of the day. I need to be improving my craft at all times. And so I made the decision, and I just did everything I could to build up my resume and build up who I am and change how I appear on like LinkedIn and my website and everything, and just went deep, dove in, took the plunge.
Yeah, so you bring up LinkedIn, and I actually made a note to ask you about that because I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I tell everyone that like every major opportunity I've had in the past like 6 years has come to me through LinkedIn, and you're an advocate of LinkedIn as well. Like what's your sort of strategy and approach there?
Yeah, so I think that's the best online option for getting professionals to look at you.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I approach it is I'll do it funny ways. Like if I'm looking at a job that I think is interesting, I'll just do a quick search for anybody who's in that same company with similar jobs, and especially recruiters.
Right.
And I'll add the ones I think is appropriate, and the rest I'll just kind of look at their profile, because what that does is it sends them a link that says, this guy looked at your profile.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they might click back and look at my profile and be like, oh, this guy looks interesting. And then if they see my application come through, they might remember, oh, that was that guy that I saw on LinkedIn who had a pretty cool profile. So I kind of do it that way. But the real way that I've used it to help me is that I'm not afraid to reach out to people.
Yeah.
And, I've reached out to people who haven't replied, of course, some big directors at DreamWorks and Pixar and whatnot, who just don't have time. And I imagine they get billions of requests, or maybe not billions, a lot of requests, and reached out to other people who would seem like they'd be too busy to help me, but they're happy to get online and just chat. And I never, say, how can you help me? I just, say, oh, I love your career. You've done some awesome work. Would you be willing to share your thoughts either via email or on the phone or in person over coffee? And, it's happened in all of those ways. And that I wouldn't say that's what got me the job at Telltale, but that definitely played a big part into it, where I was networking, talking to people, and a couple of the people that I ended up working for and with and whatnot were people that I had chatted with before. And so it just kind of worked. Like I wasn't friends with any of them, so you can't really say it was nepotism, but they definitely knew who I was and had seen me around and knew how passionate I was and how dedicated I was to learning the craft.
What kind of energy goes into nurturing those relationships? Like how much time do you spend talking to these guys?
So not a lot, because you don't want to. I mean, I don't want to overwhelm them.
Yeah,
It's like I'm not here to be like, hey, look at me, hey, all the time. So, for example, the guy who ended up hiring me, I had one email exchange with him at first, and then I had 2 or 3 over the course of like 6 months. Mm-hmm. So not a lot. Where I was just kind of like, I saw that he had gone to the UCLA online program in screenwriting.
Yeah.
And I just finished my master's in writing, and I was like, well, what else can I do to set myself apart? So I looked at that, and I emailed him about it and just said, I'm going to enroll in this. I just wanted to make sure to see what your thoughts were, make sure you had positive outcomes from it. And he loved it, and he was like, yeah, definitely do it. Here's some of the professors I thought were awesome, So there was that little bit, and then like a little bit later, he had made the move over from Pixar to Telltale, and I was like, oh, hey, just wanted to touch base and say that, that company looks pretty awesome. Their games are great. If I ever get an opportunity, I'm going to apply. And then a few months later, a job opening came up, and then I applied, and la-di-da.
There you go.
So little bits like that. Somebody else, the same situation, was at Pixar and ended up going over to Telltale, and I didn't. It's funny, 'cause that one didn't help me at all, but it's funny because he ended up being my coworker.
Yeah.
And so like him, I'd done like 1 or 2 emails, and then he got on the phone with me and gave me like an hour-long conversation. And it's really funny because he was kind of negative on the whole thing, like not negative, but a better word, I don't know, better word. But he was like, this is really tough. You can have this goal, but it's kind of a dream. It might work out, it might not. For most people, it doesn't. So, just keep doing your thing if you have to, but don't ever expect it to become a real career. And then a few months later, we're both working at Telltale together. So we both laughed about that, of course.
That is kind of the challenge. I mean, before the call, I told you I've written professionally, meaning I've been paid to write since I was like 12 years old. But I joke and tell people, it doesn't mean I make a living, because it's I work for myself now, and it's very challenging because there's other aspects besides the writing. And I would love to just do the writing. In fact, all I want to do is write books, and no one will just pay me to write books all day. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think. Do you write? Remind me if you write nonfiction as well.
So I do write some nonfiction, and I kind of make my living from copywriting more than anything, but and creative work. But the books are doing okay. They're getting
That's
up
good.
there. So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I definitely see that with like fiction books sell here and there, but the nonfiction ones definitely seem to sell a lot more constant for me.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that might be some advice for people. If you have an area, like I didn't want to write a book on how to write because I feel like there's so many out there. Who am I to say that? But I approached my book as I am a beginner guy who has had some levels of success and have talked to a lot of people who have had some levels of success. So why don't I write a book about that? Just sharing like all my conversations with people about how to get established and make that professional image of yourself as a writer.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that. And so it's the same idea. If you have something that could be, your niche, that you can go out there and put some nonfiction books out there too that are interesting and related to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Mine is related to fiction writing, and as you noted, I kind of weaseled one of my fiction books in there as far as like structure style.
No, I thought that was brilliant. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where this is going, and it did not seem ham-fisted at all. It actually seemed like although after the third or fourth time I heard the synopsis, I'm like, okay, let's roll on with this.
Yeah, well, that was one of the dilemmas there, is because I was debating, should I do something different for each sect? Because for people who haven't read it, I did 4 different styles of structure out there. Save the cat, the writer's journey, etc. And then I did a little section under each that lays out how that approach goes into my novel Teddy Bears in Monsterland. And the problem there being is you're going to hear the exact same story over and over 4 times, but in different ways of looking at the structure. Yeah. And so I debated doing different books on that and like maybe looking at some video games and looking at movies. But then I thought, that's cool, but then you can't look at that. You're not going to see the same. You're putting apples to oranges, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. Instead of apples to apples. So I decided to risk being boring and have apples to apples.
Right. I joke, but I absolutely think you made the right call, because if you had done it any differently, you're right, it would have been apples to oranges. You wouldn't have been able to make the connection, because I've read all those books. Like I've read Save the Cat, I've read screenplay, whatever. I've read a million. Yeah. And and I know story structure, and I would not have made all those connections per se.
That's what I was trying to do, is make it more of like a reference tool too. And I actually use it myself now. Like when I'm, I want to like look back and think, oh, what is the sequence approach? What is sequence C again in the sequence approach? I'll look at my own book, which is kind of whatever. I don't know if that's narcissistic or something. But,
no, I think it's like taking notes, Yeah, so is that helpful to you to have that process? I mean, because you're clearly, are you, you consider yourself more of a plotter or more of a pantser when you write?
I originally started out as definitely a discovery writer, so more of a pantser. Which for people who don't know means like right by the seat of your pants type thing, I guess, right? Yeah. So I was more of that kind of, but because I read On Writing and I was like, oh, that's a great way to do it. Stephen King's On Writing talks about how he just kind of discovers as he goes. Mm-hmm. But I learned through the rewriting process what a pain in the butt that is, especially if you're self-publishing, which means you're editing yourself or paying people to edit. If you have an editor, I think maybe it's going to be better because they're going to do a lot of the editing for you and help you figure it out. But writing it yourself, that just means you're going to do 50 times more work than the person who outlines. So now I'm hardcore outliner. Like I don't get too in detail. This is one thing my job is teaching me too, because we go hardcore in detail. Like in every step of the way, we start off with like an outline, and then we go into the details of the outline, and then we go into the details of every single scene, and then you write each scene individually until it's perfect. Then you move on to the next scene. And that's I'm not that level with my novels. That's great because it's collaborative, so you have so many people working on it. It works out better. But what I do on my novels, I'll usually start off with, and I heard this at the Austin Film Festival by the guy who wrote Wedding Crashers, and I loved it. It was, you start with the 1-line version of your book, then you break that into the 3 different lines, one for each act of your book. So like Teddy Bears is a teddy bear has to travel into the monster land to save his boy who's taken at night. And then you go, what is the 1-line version of the first act? What is the 1-line version of the next act? What is the 1-line version of the third act? And then you take each of those and break them out even further. So you go into like, what are the main beats of that first act? And you just kind of keep expanding like that until you feel like you're ready to start writing. And I don't start writing until I feel I have at least a high level idea of where all that's going to be. Yeah. And I don't feel like you definitely don't have to put dialogue in there if you don't want to. Right now I'm adapting a novel into a screenplay, so I am putting some dialogue in there because I want to remember what they said at certain points in the novel and where that would fit in good for my screenplay. Yeah. But it all depends on how you want to approach it. And I'll often look at those structures. Sometimes I'll look at them as I go. If I just feel like I'm kind of getting lost, it just triggers something every once in a while. And I'll look at the different ones because sometimes like Save the Cat just isn't working for me. Sometimes sequence approach is, and sometimes vice versa. Yeah. And then a lot of times I'll look at it at the end of the outline and I'll say, okay, is this where I want it to be? And I don't feel like it has to match any of those. It's like those are guidelines that help the writing get you to the right emotional beats where the story needs to hit. And that's how I approach that.
So what do you use to write? Are you straight like Microsoft Word? Do you use Scrivener? Anything in particular?
I finally started going to Scrivener.
Okay. Good
and
man.
it's freaking amazing. Yeah, I wish I knew how it worked. I'm going to definitely have to spend some time doing that, which means it's time not writing, but I've already seen how much time it will save you over the long run, especially as an outliner, like
Yeah.
as you said, good man, I'm sure you're on it, and it's just wow. Yeah, so many people are finally,
Yeah, it's
talking to me
amazing.
about it.
And if you haven't already, you should check into Joseph Michael's course, Learn Scrivener Fast, which if you want a link, I can give you an affiliate link to get to it. But anyone listening is going to get that link. But
Yeah.
you can, it's an amazing course, and it really does give you all the nuts and bolts of how it works from
Awesome.
basic to advanced. So you should check it out.
What's cool right now is we have a guy who came to Telltale as a contractor, and so my kind of job right now is to get him up to date on how we do things, and vice versa. He's kind of showing me how to use Scrivener because that's what he uses.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. He's giving me his notes and his
Oh, that's
writing
awesome.
stuff,
Yeah.
and then I adapt it over, and he shows me what he did. And so
I wish
yeah,
it
it's just
were.
amazing.
I wish it were better for collaboration than it is. But
Yep.
yeah, it's a big weakness, and I also wish it were mobile, because there's been plenty of times I've been standing in line or something, and I could be editing, if I could just get into Scrivener. But
yeah, so that's what I do with Evernote. I don't know if you use Evernote at all, but I use that for like my high level, what I was just talking about, outlining.
Yeah.
Or I do like the one sentence version and et cetera. Because then you can pull it up on your phone, you can pull it up on any computer you're at. It doesn't matter. You're good. So I usually do that at first, and then eventually I get to a stage where I, in the past, transitioned over to just pure Word. I would just copy and paste all that into Word and then go from there.
Oh, that's
and now
fantastic.
I'm slowly starting to do Scrivener. So.
That's cool, man. Evernote is like my go-to everything. So
Nice.
And the web clipper, I use them Chrome, man. That's just everything. So you've got what's a typical process for you then? Like, how do you start a story? You've already talked about you're outlining your beats, I guess, but is that the starting point for you, or where's the idea originate?
Let's see. Yeah, so I have too many ideas, I guess. So another thing I use Evernote for is I just throw ideas in there.
Yeah.
And when I feel like, I think a lot of times, people talk about writer's block, and I think that just means you're not ready to write that story yet.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have an idea. I'll be watching a movie, or I'll be reading one of these books about story structure, or I'll be, working on a video game, and a totally different idea that has nothing to do with what I'm working on or watching or whatever will pop into my head, somehow triggered by something I saw, and I'll just put that in Evernote. And then I just start kind of outlining here and there. It might take me 6 months. It might take me a week. Who knows? And when I feel like I'm ready for that one, and it's just the one that's inspiring me, that's what I write. Because I don't feel like I should be forcing myself to ever write something I don't feel like at the moment.
Yeah.
And, so like that, I'd like to write a sequel to my Back by Sunrise book, which I have planned and kind of outlined, but I don't feel I'm emotionally ready for it, Like, it just, there's certain triggers that need to be hit before I want to jump into something. Although I think that it's so smart to write like a trilogy, like people want to buy trilogies. People I know who are doing successful on Amazon self-publishing, a lot of them have like fantasy trilogies. And so it seems like a smart way to go. But I really, for me, it's like as an artist, I have to write what I want to write when I want to write it. And so anyway, back to the question is, I put it in Evernote, and I just start going from there. And then the process is really, one day I'll be like, okay, I'm ready for this. I'll sit down on my computer and just go and like force myself. Some people, they have that question about like if you sit there and you don't know what to do. But I think as long as your fingers start moving, even if the first 20 minutes is crap, you're going to get in the flow of it, and it's going to start going. I'll put on some awesome music, like soundtracks from whatever movie I'm in the mood for. Maybe it's Pirates of the Caribbean or Back to the Future or something, inspiring, like, and that usually gets me in the mood. Sometimes I don't know if anybody knows Battle Royale. Of course, you're all nerds. You know the movie. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that has a great soundtrack for writing.
Yeah.
And it's just,
and its sequel or its remake, Hunger Games.
Right.
Which I don't know. I don't know that that's true. I find it funny. That's the thing that comes up every time I bring up that movie. But
yeah.
That's fantastic, man. So, okay. I like that. I do use Evernote that way. But it's more of like if I have a story idea, it's just sort of a whatever. Guy gets trapped on Mars, and then later I write The Martian and let Andy Weir take all the credit. But I never thought about doing it and then outlining it that way. I'm going to start doing that now, actually.
It's nice to have everywhere you go. You're sitting in line. You're like, what was that thing I was thinking? Oh, yeah, right there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's got that voice memo thing, too. So I could always just, quickly record something. That's very
and
cool.
documents, like if you can put document pictures in there now, so you could like if you've done note cards or whatever, you could just take a snapshot of all those note cards and you have it in there too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they've got the Post-it thing too. It does the scan and it does like character recognition or something, right?
Yeah. We're doing that actually. We're moving this weekend to a new house that has a big what do you call it, like kind of like a shed in the backyard, but it works as an office also. And so that's my room now. It's just gonna be all the walls are gonna be covered in Post-its. I'm gonna look like a crazy man. It's gonna be awesome.
Go all beautiful mind. You need like one large window in there or something, where you can just write everything on that cryptic code and everything.
Exactly. I think instead of beautiful mind, they'll probably call me something like wacky. Who the hell is that guy mind? But it'll work out.
Right. So, what are some of your biggest influences? I've only read Creative Writing Career so far, but I'm going to correct that soon because I see your fiction looks intriguing to me. It looks like my kind of stuff.
Thanks.
But what are some of your inspirations? Like, what drew you into fiction?
So this is why I love my job, because the real reason I started like getting hardcore into writing is I had read the first 3 or 4 Game of Thrones books, and I was waiting for the next one, and I was looking around, and I read other books, and I love Brandon Sanderson's books, and I love a lot of other books, but nothing was hitting me in the same way that the Game of Thrones books were. And so I said, well, instead of waiting, I'm going to write one. And then that's what started my book, Falls of Redemption, which is now published as a serial and about to be published as a complete one. And the cover for the complete one is going to be freaking amazing. It's the best cover I've ever seen in my life. So Be ready for that. It's coming soon. But so that was the first book I ever wrote, though. So, I'm going to put my my stamp of be warned on there. It's not the best writing I've ever done or anything like that. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm going to publish it because somebody might love it out there. I actually wrote it for my my brother, who at the time was 16 and was like, I don't read books. Why should I read books? So I wrote it as more of like, it's not hardcore fantasy. It's not going to feel like Game of Thrones. I approached it in if I was a 16-year-old boy and didn't like reading, what would I want to read? And that's what that book is. So, women, be warned. It's for 16-year-old boys. That's the point I'm getting across here. And so anyway, so my inspiration, though, was Game of Thrones. And then it totally evolved into this different way of writing for me. Like Back by Sunrise was because I loved, as a kid, I loved Land Before Time. And my brother, was like one of his favorite movies. He had actually lost his parents. He lost one of his parents, and his other one, for other reasons, couldn't be with him. So we adopted him. He was my cousin. Okay. So I think it hit him on some kind of emotional level there. And I loved that movie. I loved what Pixar was doing, where they had all these kind of kids movies that were also for adults. And so that's where Back by Sunrise came from. It was kind of this conglomeration of those two. And then Teddy Bears. I've always loved Greek mythology. I studied international relations and the Peloponnesian War and all this stuff, and that plays heavily into all this. And I recently did an interview, or maybe it was a blog I did for Stage 32 or Script Mag, I forget. But I was talking about how my background as a Marine and traveling around the world and stuff, how that influenced my fiction, because I'd always been doing all that, and my grandma was always trying to say, why don't you write about this? Give me a diary or something. And I'm like, I don't write diaries. So one day I decided, why don't I write it as fiction and try to get like the same kind of memories across? And of course that totally evolved into something else, which stayed nothing at all like what I originally had planned, but became the novels that I've written. So I think that's probably my answer. Like J.R.R. Tolkien, George Martin, Brandon Sanderson, these authors, the big movies like Back to the Future and all these. I have a lot of stories outlined that kind of follow more of those kind of paths, like the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn books. I have some that are very, very different than those, but kind of follow that same tone and style. And I think I'm just not there as an author yet. The writing at Telltale Games has really been forcing me to learn and improve, and I felt like I was at kind of a plateau for a little bit, and now I'm passing that plateau. Yeah. And so maybe in the next year I'll realize that I'm at the level I want to be to write those.
So do you feel because your writing, the writing you do at Telltale is very much regimented, right? Like you can't just go off on tangents, right? You're following more or less an outline, and you're not entirely in charge of the story, are you? Or how does that work? Do you feel confined by that at all?
So the first part is it really depends on what game or project you're working on. Sometimes sometimes you might be in the early stages where you are the one coming up with the outline and doing all that. And then of course it is collaborative, so everybody has to weigh in on that, and you get the higher levels, the execs feedback, and so in that sense you are definitely, it is somebody else's project, I guess is a really easy way to say that. And so that's for me why I still have to have my own projects going on, my own novels and my own screenwriting, is because you have your own stories you want to tell. And if you put everything that you have into whatever writing you're doing for somebody else, I don't think that's ever going to feel as fulfilling as you need to feel as an author,
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine, because, my writing career has, a lot of it has been for other people, but it hasn't been, even though it's been creative in its way, it hasn't been like, storytelling the way I want to do it. So I haven't felt like, I haven't felt constrained by that at all, but it's been, at times I do feel like I want to just bust out and do it my way, but I can't
that's
imagine.
Why self-publishing is great also, because you can do what you want. Like, there's this great series, I hope he takes this as positive and not negative, but the Traveler's Gate series, and the first book is called House of Blades by Will White.
Yeah.
And a friend recommended this to me, and I read it, and I was like, this is amazing! But at the time, I didn't know it was self-published. But as you read it, you definitely know it's self-published. You can feel it, not because it's written poorly or anything like that, but because at certain points, there's things that are in there that an editor would have taken out.
Yeah.
An editor just would have been like, it's kind of getting fluffy, or it's kind of, taken away from the main through line. But I think that the fact that he left those in there makes it an amazing read.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that drew me to self-publishing also, was like, for the 16-year-old boy book, like, a publisher's not going to like that. They're not going to say, let's publish a book that's only for 16-year-old boys.
Yeah.
They're going to, but I wanted to do what I want to do. And, if somebody goes on there, reviews it, and dings me and says, the girls aren't strong enough in this story, I'm going to say, okay, I don't give a crap. And this is going to sound bad. And a lot of my stories are female protagonists, and they're strong female protagonists. And so I hope that kind of outweighs the fact that other book is not that style of book. And there are some strong female protagonist characters in that book, of course, too. But I tried to capture a realistic situation that worked for that character and for all the characters involved, and that was geared towards my brother. So anyway, back to the point of it's nice to have that freedom every once in a while and just be able to do whatever the heck you want to do.
Yeah. And self-publishing is it's the perfect venue, because no one really cares if you screw up. You can always update it and fix it if something's, really wrong, and, lots of second chances.
Yeah.
So yeah. What do you think is the very best advice you ever got about being in the creative industry, like, or who were your mentors, I guess? I want to start with the advice, like something somebody can chew on, but if it comes down to mentors, let me know.
Yeah, well, let me say, like, the good advice for when you're working for somebody else is just to not be precious. Just remember that I think you got to put your heart into everything you do and present the best writing and be professional about it. But remember that it isn't your writing. If you're writing for somebody else, it's their story that they're trying to tell, and you're just helping them do it. If you have the other attitude of, like, this is me, I put all my heart and soul into this, and you're trying to change it, you're not going to last long in that kind of industry, whether it's screenwriting or videogram writing or maybe ghost writing or what have you. And as far as your own writing, I think taking that other side of it, where it is yours and it is you and it represents everything about you, and making sure that you present the best image on that side, because this is going to represent you. So as I was just talking about with that whole thing about, like, that one book not having as strong a female protagonist as my other ones, that could come back and hurt me at some point. And so my point being that it kind of ties into that advice of, making sure that everything represents you. Yeah. Kind of, and I'm taking I think it was given to me as more of, like, the professional advice, and, like, how it led into my LinkedIn profile and website and everything changing. But I'm throwing it into my fiction also, where, you're presenting, you're building a brand. And all of that ties into your brand. Yeah, and that idea of brand. It's been diluted. People don't quite get what it really means. But I like the way you present it, because if your goal there is make sure everything you do represents you, and tells the story that you intend to tell. I think that's pretty powerful. I think that can have a lot of impact on someone's career, no matter what the career. Yeah, and it has affected the books I write, because there are some very strong stories I want to tell that I just haven't those ones I haven't written because I don't see how they fit into my brand yet, and I
Yeah.
might end up doing a pen name. I don't know, but I haven't figured that part out yet.
Yeah,
I'm
I
still
haven't
evolving, of
either.
course.
I've
Yeah.
got so many stories that I'm like, that'd be a great story. I'd love to see that film. It's sort of, whatever. I've got a couple of things that are sort of Nicholas Sparks like,
Yeah.
that are not in my brand and not
Right.
really the kind of books I write, but something I think I'd enjoy writing.
Yeah,
Hard
and
to
the
figure
guys
out.
on the self-publishing podcast are doing a great job of doing their thing where they have multiple
Yeah.
kind of pen names and they write for other people occasionally and stuff like that, which is awesome because they have the time to do that. But if you're like if you're working your 8-hour day and you can focus on one novel at a time and it takes you at the minimum 3 months to write,
Yeah.
sometimes like 2 years to write, you really have to focus on what is your brand and where you're trying to set yourself up. And maybe once you have 20 books or like you said, like you have a lot of books out there, so maybe at this point you could start kind of having a secondary brand inside of your main brand. But
Kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, I think that a lot of the indie authors are starting to do that, and not always under different pen names. So I don't know what works best. So I'm just kind of watching everybody.
and I don't think it has to be. I like the fact that if I read a book by Brandon Sanderson, I can just go online and type in Brandon Sanderson and find his books. I don't want to have to like figure out what his pen name is to read his.
Exactly.
He does some middle grade books. The Arithmetist is one that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it was silly. It was not at all like his regular fantasy, but I wouldn't want to have to find a pen name for that because it's still him. It's still his writing. And so
Right.
I say go for it.
Well,
Yeah,
and traditionally, I think a lot of authors that's what they did, sort of the old school crowd, right? But it's like there's a paranoia in the indie world that if I don't write the exact same kind of book I wrote the past 10 times, I'm going to lose my audience,
Yeah, but to stick on track and not like can't contradict myself. I wouldn't right now. I mean, I don't think I would ever, but I wouldn't right now, especially write a erotica, an erotic book because I have there's my children's books or preteen books, and so that would be totally confusing. But if I write, so my book that's coming out through the traditional publisher is a literary book about a woman from Central Asia trying to deal with life in America, and obviously quite different from my other books. But it's not no reader's gonna read that and say, "Why the hell is this guy writing these other books?"
Right. Yeah. Although erotica, man, I keep looking at people on the keyboards and stuff that are making a fortune doing it. I'm like, my moral compass won't let me do it, but man, that's a lot of money.
I don't know who your listenership is here, but let me just say this too. I like that certain writers out there are doing it under pen names of females, and so here's the thing: I don't think any females care if they're reading a book that's written by females and it's arousing them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a guy reading a book and you're a straight guy reading a book by guys and it's getting you aroused, that feels weird. So I would just advise people to maybe partner with a female or go under a female pen name or something. I don't know, but I just just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on the sensibilities of the writer and the crowd, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. I think the whole thing
two
makes
writers
me uncomfortable.
we know of, they write under a pen name of a female that they're friends with, and I think that works. And so that's all.
Yeah.
We don't have to go down that.
No, okay. Yeah, we'll shift gears. So, you've got now you said there's a sequel coming out. I say a sequel. You've got like a follow up to Creative Writing Career. Is that covering new ground, or is it the same kind of like you're talking to more professionals you've met like since
we
then?
are kind of so it still includes some. So the idea of the first one, as I mentioned briefly, was that I wanted to look at people from all over the place, but all over the board, but especially people who were having small levels of success who aren't like the people who've been in the industry for 20 years, because those people who've been in the industry for 20 years have a total different outlook on it. They don't really know what it takes to succeed nowadays.
Right.
So I wanted to look at the people who know what it takes to succeed now. The people who have had success in the last couple of years and are, starting to make it. And I think I accomplished that. There's some people with a lot more, of course, in there, but most of them are in that kind of area.
Yeah.
And so the new book still has some of that, but it's definitely taken a step up. Like some of the interviews include Sean Platt from the Self Publishing Podcast, who's had a little bit more success, and Jeff Goins, who does a lot of writing also, and like I was mentioning, Mark Andrews and all these people. So it's definitely kind of taken the next step, and it's not 100% targeted that way, but it's kind of it's just how it worked out.
Yeah.
and I kind of like it. Like
well, and I will say, and I have no criticisms of creative writing career at all. But I mean, if I had any, it would be that most of the folks you interviewed, like they came from a different system than what I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
and but their advice is still stellar. I mean, now the debate about whether or not to live in LA, I think that one's going to go on for a while because
Yeah.
no one seemed to agree.
A lot of that book originated from the blog where I was just blogging, and then eventually I was like, oh, let's make it a book.
Yeah.
And then I, got some extra interviews for that to try to target a little bit better. But that's why that image comes across, or that message, and that's also why what kind of instigated the idea of, oh, let's write it targeted for those beginning level people and from advice from people who just like the next level up.
Yeah.
And because of that, so that's the difference, I guess. What I'm saying is that the new book is 100% targeted as a book, where like now I knew what I was doing and knew that I wanted to make a book. So we've especially reached out to people for the purpose of writing a book, and it doesn't really have that question as much of LA or not, because we're not. We already addressed that in book one. So now we're looking at more, where is the industry going? Where do you see you fitting into it? And for people who've been in a little bit longer as well, how do you? I've actually asked a lot of those questions. It's more, how do you've now entered the work field. You are a writer, you are publishing, or you are, just starting your career as a game or a video game writer or a screenwriter. How do you keep that career going? How do you make sure it's not just a one-time, explosion of awesomeness?
yeah. And questions of like, where do you grow from here would be nice to have answered. Like, because I see, I happen to know, oddly enough, I mean, lots of people who are very successful indie publishers. Like, they're making their full-time living selling their books. And I haven't graduated to that level yet, but once you got to that point, I mean, I'm a fairly ambitious person. I want to know, like, how I've succeeded to the degree that I'm paying for my living with my creative work. Where do I go from here? So I'd love to see answers to questions like that.
And there's some great video game writers in this one too coming up, and that was one of my worries from book one. Is I only knew like most of the. It's funny, like how do I say this? I'm gonna sound like a misogynist or something, but most of the people I knew who were writing and were males, and then out of the few females that I asked for interviews, most of them said no, and so all the males said yes, and a lot of the females said no, and so of course the book might come across as slightly more heavy on the male side of interviews. And I don't know why the females I asked were less interested. Is it because I'm a male? Is it because they don't want to share their experiences for some reason? I have no idea. But book two, because I've already got book one out there, and it's actually been number one in one of the categories, for like 3 weeks going on now, which is pretty exciting. Sweet. And I've leveraged a lot of that to get some more awesome interviews. And I've been in the industry longer, and so I've reached out to more people. And so this is exciting because I have probably like 9 interviews with video game writers in this next book, and 6 of them are female, and they're doing well too. Like they're not just beginners. They're like Anne LeMay, who wrote on Dragon Age and Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect 3, and is now in Mass Effect 4, and a bunch of these awesome writers like Toya. How do you say her name? I'll just say Toya, who presents at GTC every year, and she wrote this book called The Narrative Toolbox, I think Narrative Design Toolbox for video games, but it's it's story stuff that can be applicable to anybody. And Evan Skolnick, who wrote this great book, he's one of the video game males in there who's done some great stuff. But my point just being, this book is going to kind of take it to the next level, and it has like the full spectrum of like who you'd want to hear from. It's not just people I know, but it's people who are out there doing awesome work.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I'm a fan now, man. So I'm gonna. I just followed you on Amazon like 2 seconds ago. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to go ahead and wrap this up. But I really appreciate you being on the show. It's all great advice too. My audience is primarily people interested in sort of alternative careers or unconventional careers, and writing has always fallen kind of into that because it may or may not be a career, despite doing all the work. So it's great to talk to people who not only are you successful in the career, I mean you've got a great job, it sounds like, but you're also connecting with more people that we can use as mentors. That's pretty awesome, man. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And every one of those people that we talked to too, we're telling them like that. We're saying, hey, we're doing this because we want to kind of be the mentor for these people who don't have a mentor. And all these all these people that we're interviewing are like trying to also be there for all you readers to say, here's what I think you should do, like, so you don't have to sit there and take the time to sit with a mentor who might not know what you actually want to do or know, like often you try to get mentors and they just don't connect with you.
Yeah.
Well, now you can listen to 20 or 30 mentors in a row, and especially when the audiobooks come out, which are, I think especially listen to this military veterans one when it comes out, military veterans and writing career.
Mm-hmm.
This guy did amazing work. He's been in a few movies. He was in a Linkin Park video. He was in video games like Battlefield Hardline and whatnot as a voice actor.
Oh, very
and
cool.
He did a great job on the audiobook. So, I mean, listening to that on your drive and just getting inspired and like hearing the advice from these guys and gals, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I actually went back and forth with WhisperSync between the audiobook version and the Kindle version on this book. So
how'd that work out for you?
I like doing that because it means I can keep the whole thing rolling. But the reader, he has an interesting voice, and he didn't bother inflecting female at all. So it was kind of funny to hear because he sounds like he's a this rough and tough like aged veteran or something. So
kind of like a Southern gentleman or something.
Yeah, yeah. He sounded good though. Yeah, I liked it. I liked him. I was actually sad to hear the whole book end because I actually got accustomed to hearing his voice when I was driving. So
yeah, I've heard most people give me great feedback, and then one guy said that he at first found it kind of dull and slow and boring, and then after about 5 minutes he was hooked, and then the rest of it he just couldn't stop. So I hope that's how most people. Well, hopefully everybody's hooked from the beginning, but for those people who listen and say, I don't know, I think I'm pretty sure they'll get hooked.
Yeah, I recommend it. Anybody listening to this right now, you're probably an audiobook listener, so I recommend it. Go check it out.
I think everybody's audiobook listeners nowadays. It's too much fun.
Oh, I know, and also that drive time, man. I mean, anytime I'm on the road, I got to be listening to something, podcast, audiobook, whatever. I'm always cramming my brain with something. So
exactly.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, man. Everyone else listening, you can check the show notes to find where you can find Justin online. You can find him at justinmsloan.com or on Twitter at justinmsloan. And you can also check out the Creative Writing Career blog, creativewritingcareer.com, which is his blog. And those will all be in the show notes, so fear not. Thanks again, Justin, for being on, man. And everyone else, I'll see you in a few minutes with the wrap-up.
Thank you so much.
And this is that wrap-up. How you like them apples? So, I love talking to Justin Sloan. He was cool, and I'm actually looking forward to getting to know him a little better. I'm going to keep in touch. And he is looking to work with a former guest of the show, Michael Laron, and I don't remember the episode he was on. Let me look that up while I'm talking to you. So, but if you remember, he was the guy who was writing the Decision Select books. The sort of, grown-up version of Choose Your Own Adventure. And, as was pointed out, he actually had on his cover, he had a teddy bear. He has one of his books is teddy bear oriented, just like Justin's book, which I found kind of a coincidence, I guess, at first. And now it seems like serendipity. How you like them apples? I'm not finding the episode right off, so... What a shame. See, this is what happens when you don't prepare in advance. Oh, here it is. Okay, so that would be episode 10. Man, that was way back. I need to get Michael back on the show again. Michael Laron, episode 10, if you go looking. I believe that's in the November section, archive. So, anyway, so that'll be in the show notes too, so you can click through. But talking to Justin, it kind of reminded me of, sort of the reasons why I got into writing in the first place. Because I didn't get into writing to be a copywriter or a marketing writer. I mean, I got in to be a creative writer. I wanted to tell stories for a living. And, I've done that. I'm doing that. And I'm getting much better at that. And, there's something about this career, man. It's one of the few jobs, quote unquote, that you can end up with that... You basically, it's like Michael Laron's books. It's, choose your own adventure. You can choose the path you want to be on. If you want to be a video game writer, I mean, there's a path for that. And I think the point that Justin makes is it's mostly about networking. It really is about who you know and about how you present yourself, how you portray yourself to your audience. So Yeah, very important. I dig that. And, the lesson on LinkedIn was doubly important. I'm serious. Most of the big opportunities I've gotten in the past several years have come to me through LinkedIn. And I'm, actually about to fine tune that entire presence and my entire web presence again. I'm working on the website again. This time, though, I've decided, you know what? It's kind of a get off the pot kind of scenario here, because I am an author. I write fiction. That's what I do. I don't want to do all these other things. And so as I'm starting to kind of cut some of that stuff out, bit by bit, and as the book sales start to pick up and get closer and closer to being a full-time support income, that's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to do. So, and if you're interested in doing that, I might be able to help you. You should get in touch, because I can at least get you rolling forward with a decent momentum. That's what's happening here, man. And I'm grateful, by the way, to all the people I talk to. My partner Nick Thacker and I, he's helped out a lot in moving me forward in this. I've hit a lot of my career goals in the past year because of working with him. Talking to the guys from Self-Publishing Podcast, Johnny, Sean, and Dave. Going to the summit that they put on back in April. All the people that I met through there, the outstanding people that I got a chance to hang out with, and now we're connected in a sort of mastermind group. All those people have made a huge difference in my career. So I guess if I have a tip of the week this week, it is this: go out and find people who are performing in the career you want to have at or above the level that you would like to you'd like to reach, or at the very least, they're performing better than you are at a level just above where you are. Because if you make those connections now, and as they grow, you've got those connections still, right? So if you introduce yourself to an indie author who isn't maybe making a living as an indie author just yet, but is making an income while you are making no income, this is your chance to get in early, to buy stock early. Imagine if someone had come along to you and said, if you invest in Apple right now, it's only like $1 a share, and then later, what would that be worth? It's the same thing in your network. Start investing time in people who are, that you can see are clearly on track to do the kind of thing that you want to do. It's a good investment. It can be a mutually beneficial relationship. It always should be. Look for the ways that you can help them instead of always asking them to help you. And I think you'll come out the better for it. So that's the lessons I've learned. It's a lesson I learned from talking to Justin Sloan today as well. So I hope you got a lot out of this interview. I really enjoyed it. I'm stoked. I can't wait for the sequel to that book to come out, because I'm already a fan. So. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, if you want to support me and the show, the best and most beloved way to do that is to go check out my books. Go to kevintumlinson.com/books. Pick up something you like. They're available on practically every platform and just about every nation at this point. So no matter where you are in the world, I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you are a reader. If you'd like to find out about new releases, new episodes of the podcast, new blog posts, anything Kevin and Wordslinger related, you can do that real easy. Go to kevintumlinson.com or wordslingerpodcast.com. They both take you to the same place these days in general. And you can sign up and get on the mailing list. You can become a slinger. And once you're a slinger, you get all the perks of being a slinger. Slingerdom comes with things like freebies that I give out every now and then. Occasionally I have contests and giveaways. Occasionally I just give you a free copy of a short story or a free copy of an ebook, and you get to enjoy that just for being a friend of the show and a friend of the Wordslinger. So go check that out. You also learn about new book releases, new blog posts, new podcast episodes, all things Kevin and Wordslinger related. So go check that out. I'd also love it if you would give me a call at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673, where you can leave me a voicemail to ask me anything, and I will do my best to answer it on air. If you've got a question for one of my former guests, if you know about an upcoming guest and you'd like to ask a question, just fling that my way. I'd be happy to answer that. Speaking of upcoming guests, next week we're going to be talking to somebody really cool. His name is Tim Fargo. He's an author. He's the author of Alphabet Success, and he is also the creator of Tweet Jukebox, which is something I have used in the past and really dug. It lets you kind of schedule your tweets in chunks, and it will actually repost those for you based on timing of your choosing. It's very cool. You should check that out in advance. TweetJukebox.com is the website, and you can check out Tim Fargo. He's also on Twitter at alphabetsuccess.com. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to wrap that up. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you tune in next week. If you're just tuning in for the first time, go check out the archives. Plenty of great information, great guests for you to learn from. Mentors galore. So take care of yourselves out there, and I will see you next time.
Word Slinger.